Hi, welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer. And today, and as we do at the last day of every month, the working business day of every month, I should say, we are having our show, Finding Colorado's Next Governor. And as always, we have with us Jeff Wasden and Ed Seelever. Welcome, gentlemen. How are you today?
Great. Thanks for having us here.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. And we also have gubernatorial candidate Walker Stapleton. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. I'm going to let these guys take it away and do their job.
Well, Walker, it's great to have you on. For those of you that don't know, this has been part of our series in bringing in the candidates for governor, and we're excited to have you, our two-time elected state treasurer, Walker Stapleton, here today. Walker, as you look about your past, your terms of service, private sector background, now an elected statewide official here, what was really the impetus and the push to make this jump in running for governor of the state of Colorado?
Well, Jeff, I'm privileged to now be the longest-serving statewide elected Republican we have in Colorado. I believe that's because I've tried to be a common-sense conservative while in office that has stood up for taxpayers every opportunity I've had. I have had the privilege during my time as treasurer of being on the front lines of every important economic policy battle we fought in the state of Colorado. A couple years ago, I was the leader of the effort statewide to defeat Amendment 66, the largest proposed tax increase in Colorado history. We beat that 2-1. I made the argument that the money was not going to end up in the classrooms of our kids where it belonged, but instead backfill unfunded liabilities in our massively bankrupt public pension system. A little over a year ago, I was the leader of the effort with Governor Ritter to defeat statewide a terrible public policy idea for a single-payer health care system, Amendment 69. We defeated that nearly 5-1, and yet every single candidate on the Democratic side running for governor is supportive of a single-payer health care system as the way forward for health care in Colorado. And as many people know, I've been the longest, largest, and loudest voice for reforming our public pension system, not because I want to take anything away from anybody, but because it is the biggest debt that we have in state government. And unless we address it, we are going to have more dollars siphoned off from our kids' classrooms in our 176 school districts and more dollars siphoned off from our cities all across the state of Colorado. And I am the father of 3, first and foremost, and the husband of my wife, Jenna. My oldest son, Craig, is 10. My middle daughter, Colette, is 6. And my youngest, Olivia, is 4. And the Colorado that I want them to inherit is hopefully one that's going to be filled with abundant economic opportunity, not just for my kids, but for all kids and future generations in Colorado. And my kids are a huge inspiration to me to run for governor.
Now, I think a lot of people know about your stint as treasurer, but not many know about your background before that. Tell us about your work in the private sector and the kind of work you've done as a businessman.
Absolutely. Before I ever was elected treasurer, Ed, I tell people that I was in the real world, as I like to call it, and that is the business world. I'm fortunate to have both an MBA and a graduate degree in business economics. But more importantly, from a practical standpoint, I ran a small but publicly traded real estate company on the NASDAQ that we were fortunately able to take private because of Sarbanes-Oxley and other regulations that were bleeding us dry. And in my capacity as the CEO of this company, I created jobs, I balanced budgets, I met payroll, and I ended up building a successful real estate company that is now a private real estate company, which I, for one, as an owner of the business, and the other owners of the business are very happy about. And that allowed me to pursue running for treasurer the first time, to pursue what I call the true American dream of high stress and low pay afforded by elected office.
Walker, your background, you've talked about a couple of the initiatives that you've been in the front line and leading the fight. One of those was education in '66, as you mentioned, the largest tax increase proposed in Colorado history. I want to start there with education policy. Certainly, the competition for talent and the Colorado paradox are widely known in this state as business and industry continues to grow, and Colorado becomes kind of at the front and center line for a lot of the initiatives around apprenticeships and other things. Talk a little bit about your philosophy around education, your priorities, what you'd like to see happen in the education space here.
Well, I'm a huge proponent, first and foremost, for education reform, and I was fortunate enough to be chosen for a program called the Hunt Cain Fellowship for Educational Leaders. And this is a program that takes a few select Republicans from across the country and a few select Democrats, and it's a program that's run by Tim Kaine, the former governor of New Jersey, and Jim Hunt, former governor of North Carolina, at the Hunt Institute in North Carolina, and exposes them to the best minds in education across the country. And this is a program that I was lucky enough to be selected for, and it took place over a year and a half, and I learned a lot, but I learned about what is really hopeful here in Colorado, and that is, if you look at the Denver Public School District, our largest school district that we have here in Colorado, the superintendent of Denver Public Schools is a friend of mine named Tom Boasberg, pretty much a dyed-in-the-wool liberal. We don't agree on too many things, but we agree on two very important things, and those are, number one, that para has become an albatross around the necks of school budgets all across the state of Colorado, and number two, that competition in public education works. And I give Tom a lot of credit because Tom has been a vocal advocate for charter schools, so much so that there has been a incredible proliferation under his watch of charter schools in the Denver public school system, and so much so that last year, there were more non-union teachers teaching in public school than union-based teachers because of the success of charter schools. And we have, as an example, I had the privilege of touring DSST, the Denver School of Science and Technology, run by Bill Kurtz, which is just absolutely inspirational for people to do. 100% graduation rates, teaches STEM to kids from diverse economic backgrounds, and across the school street, from the first DSST location, now there's multiple locations. There is a Denver public school that is graduating at less than 50%. And what I say to people is, where would you rather send your child, regardless of his or her economic circumstances? This should not be a partisan issue. This is an issue of opportunity. And I believe that all families in Colorado should have an equal opportunity to allow their child to succeed when picking a school. And that's why I'm excited at what has happened in the Denver Public School District. And I think it should be a model for the rest of Colorado as well, because in some areas of our state, it is not nearly as easy for charters to get established and for there to be competition in public education. Whether it be DSST or Stride or many other schools or KIPP, Denver has become a model for the success of charter schools.
Industry's certainly worried about, the preparation level and career readiness skills for the employees that they're ultimately plugging into the pipeline to allow business to continue to innovate and grow. You talked about the opportunities, but there's certainly an opportunity deficit going on in here, and the access to quality education does not exist for all residents in this state. Access to a quality education, the pipeline that may differ from those wanting to go into college versus into careers. How do you as governor help shape that policy and ensure, Walker, that all students in this state are prepared to enter into a career development program or ready for college and ultimately ready to enter the workforce and create meaningful?
That's a great question, Jeff, and that's exactly why I'm running for governor, because I think in Colorado we can do better and we must do better as far as this is concerned. And this is a differentiating factor between my running for governor and a number of candidates on the Democratic side who are espousing the idea that anybody who graduates high school in Colorado should be offered free college tuition paid for by the state of Colorado, which in my mind would allow us to assume some of the trillions of dollars of unfunded student loan debt at the state level, and we saddle students and people who offer loans, in this case the state, with debt that will never be repaid, while ill-equipping those students to do anything competitive or get a competitive job. And I want to point out, a couple weeks ago I was endorsed by ABC, the Associated Builders and Contractors Rocky Mountain chapter. And as part of their endorsement of me, they endorsed me at a business called RK Mechanical in North Denver that installs HVAC systems. And I gave a little talk on the shop floor, and then I got a tour of that facility. And when I was touring that facility, I was told by the foreman, we have 4 times the number of jobs available that we can fill with Colorado applicants. We have our own training program, and yet we still have to search for people outside of Colorado that we are willing to offer skilled labor positions to at very high rates of pay. And it's not just them. I was at J.K. Butler, a commercial window installer, great entrepreneurial success story. A friend of mine, Mark Butler, runs it. And same thing with them. They have multiple jobs available that they can't even fill with Colorado bodies. And there's a disconnect. The state of Colorado needs to be working in a collaborative way on skills and vocational-based training, not promising people pipe dreams of college or community college educations that equips them to only work at a fast food restaurant down the street. That's a disingenuous promise to be making to kids in Colorado, especially when they're looking for opportunities in more rural, impoverished communities in Colorado.
So what is that collaborative way? What program would you oversee as governor to make that happen?
You know, that's a great question too, Ed. Toyota has been involved with a number of states now on a fantastic program where they take a number of students from high schools. They take a couple high schools under their wing, and they train kids in technical skills and vocation-based training. And they have member companies that are part of a consortium that guarantee to give kids a job when they finish this program. And they have to keep their grades up in the different subject matters. And Kentucky has participated in this. Alabama has participated in this. And they guarantee that if you go through the program, you will get a job at one of these companies, be it Lockheed Martin or Toyota. And I believe they have had great success with this pilot program in more than a dozen states, and we need to bring this program to Colorado just as one example.
We're going to shift back to some other priorities, but I just want to use the two that you mentioned up front. And healthcare was the other one you mentioned, Amendment 69, the single-payer system that you helped lead the fight as the state chair. When you start looking at healthcare and the rising premiums, the single largest cost driver impacting small business today, and the access to healthcare, the quality, affordability, but certainly the ability to pay for healthcare and ensure that all Coloradans have access, what does that look like, right? You led the fight against this. Do you have an answer? What do you want to see for healthcare? And I know that you've got the ACA at the federal level. What is the state's role, and what do you want to do as governor?
Well, first, I was the only treasurer and the first treasurer to endorse President Trump's tax plan back in December. And the White House put out a press release on that. And the reason I did so is I thought it would be something that was catalytic to Colorado's economy. And many economists are saying that it could mean $1 billion plus for the state of Colorado. That to me is really helpful. Another aspect of the president's tax plan was a repeal of the individual mandate. And last year in Colorado, approximately 150,000 Coloradans were forced to pay a penalty because they could not afford health insurance. Out of those 150,000 Coloradans, 80% of them had a household income of less than $50,000. People that can least afford it, families that can least afford it, paying a phantom tax imposed on them by the federal government and being offered no health care in return. What I think is going to happen is that as the federal government proves itself more and more inept with a capital I when it comes to solving our health care challenges, they will ultimately kick it back to the states in the form of block grants. And there will be all sorts of battles over whether to make those block grants retroactive to the Affordable Care Act, whether to make them inflation adjusted, but they will wash their hands of health care, and effectively the governors will be responsible for how to make Medicaid sustainable and make sure it doesn't bust our budget. And in terms of Colorado, when I started as treasurer, the budget of the state was $18 billion. Today, the budget of Colorado is $29 billion and counting, and the two largest drivers of our budget growth, of our indebtedness, are out-of-control Medicaid expansion to 600,000 Coloradans, for which we have no idea how we're going to pay for on an ongoing or sustainable basis, and our out-of-control entitlement system with respect to the pensions. And if we fix those, we will have a better economic future in Colorado, and I can go into the ways that I think we're going to have to deal with Medicaid expansion too.
Well, let's skip over Medicaid for a second, and just the fact that businesses, and small businesses in particular, are dealing with rising costs to their health insurance. Is there a role for the state government, if you're a governor, to play in getting involved and tempering those rising costs, whether it be of pharmaceuticals, of healthcare delivery, or of insurance?
Absolutely. I think you have to restore more competition to the marketplace. We have 14 counties, mainly in western Colorado, but all in rural Colorado, that have one choice of healthcare provider. Individuals have seen double-digit premium increases. people are paying more for their mortgages than they are or more for their health insurance than they are for their mortgages. That is a bad scenario, and I think you have to restore choice to the marketplace, and you have to restore options to employers. And by options, I mean getting back to the model of a plan, a catastrophic plan for millennials of a lower deductible, but a more limited coverage plan, something that they can afford that improves access and affordability at the same time to some sort of care. And I tell a story which I think is instructive, at least it's been for me, and that is I have 3 kids. Every time winter comes, it is a revolving door of sickness in my home, and my kids have had ear infections all winter long, it seems. And during the last holiday season, I had all 3 kids come down with ear infections, but instead of taking the kids to their pediatrician, I booked them appointments at the little clinic at King Soopers across the street, where I paid a small copay for a nurse to see them, prescribed them amoxicillin. The pharmacy was right next door to the little clinic. I never had to wait in line because I booked online, had to hardly wait at the pharmacy. If I had taken them to their pediatrician, I would have paid significantly more, and the insurance company would have billed significantly more. That's just one example, but I think there needs to be a greater proliferation of community health care centers. We need more of a managed Medicaid model. If you go to Denver Health on a Friday night, it looks like Grand Central Station for a reason, because you have indigents there, you have people that have Medicaid extended to them that are non-critical, and then you have the people with the gunshots kind of all together and in one room, and from a care and a cost and an access and an affordability standpoint, it's a broken system.
I want to shift to economic development. You referenced, obviously, the Tax Reform and Jobs Acts that went into place and its opportunity to drive significant revenue and economic impact here in the state. Economic development's certainly been in the news because of the Amazon deal, and we can talk a little bit about that as we move forward. But how do you support existing businesses? How do you retain those, keep those in the state, level that playing field for them to continue to flourish and grow and expand their footprint? And then what's your philosophy on going out and attracting new businesses to Colorado? And as far as incentive packages or other ways?
So I am not for, and Ed and I have talked about this. I think Ed interviewed me on this a couple months ago. It's all become a blur, but I am not for giveaways. I'm for incentive-based tax credits that are available to every company in Colorado when they grow their revenues and grow headcounts. I think incentive-based tax credits make a lot of sense. They encourage employers to grow their businesses. I think that geographic-based tax credits are something that's interesting because if a small and medium-sized business wants to look beyond the metro area into one of our communities in western Colorado or down in Pueblo, whether it be Grand Junction or Pueblo or up in Larimer, that might make a lot of sense and something that we need to look at. But when I hear economic development, I hear jobs, high-paying jobs. We talked about skilled jobs and vocational jobs, which we lack, and I also hear infrastructure and affordable housing, 2 big problems that we need to solve in the state of Colorado. We must solve our infrastructure challenges in Colorado, not just incrementally, not just for the short term, but for the long term, if we want to have the economic development that I think we all want to see in the future in Colorado. And we have to solve the affordable housing problem, because millennials that I've talked to, that we've had events for, that's their number one issue, and it should be, because if you're just getting started, you're just married, you're just getting a family started, and you come to Colorado, you want to find a place to live. And the alarming statistic that I'm sure both of you know is that right now, if you're renting, you're paying more than 40% of your net take-home income for rent. I mean, that is unsustainable for the young man or young woman that's trying to start off in business and trying to start a family. And if you're buying a place, you need $75,000 of equity minimum, and we're looking at nearly $400,000 for the average home in the Denver metro area, and that's not sustainable. And we can do better better, and we must here in Colorado. And I'm excited to tackle that challenge as governor.
Well, you got two roads we can go down there. Let's start down the affordable housing road here. A lot of people would say that the reason rent is so high, housing is so high, is just the market right now. What role is there for the state to step in here? What can you as governor do to affect that?
Well, I think fundamentally, Ed, it's a fundamental problem of economic problem of supply and demand, and we do not have enough supply right now for the demand for housing, plain and simple. I would argue that we do not have enough supply because we have not meaningfully found a way to fix construction defects. And the premise of construction defects, for those who don't know, is that it offers consumer protection. But at some point, you're offering consumer protection and harming the very consumers in the process. And if you're building for the non-real estate folks out there, if you're building a 350 unit residential development, pretty good idea that you can find a misplaced wire in a bathroom or a faucet that's out of where it should be, and bring a lawsuit. And the legislature came and created this kind of incremental step that needs to be taken to an HOA, where a majority of an HOA can decide whether to bring a construction defects lawsuit. But you have to recuse yourself if you're on the HOA and you're related to somebody who's a contractor or is in the development business. And it's really just an intermediate step for trial lawyers to have to take. And this is something trial lawyers in Colorado have made tens of millions of dollars on construction defects litigation, which means they are a very powerful lobby down at the state capitol. And unless we find a right to cure over a 90 or 20-day period, we're not going to get the catalytic effect we need on residential permits and solve the affordable housing crisis.
Hey, before we jump into roads and talk transportation solutions specifically, how much of the anti-growth sentiment do you think really ties into this congestion issue on the affordable, attainable worker housing that you referenced? You've got this potential ballot initiative restricting growth in the 10 metro counties to a 1%. What is that feeling of why people are trying to close Colorado to others that are willing and wanting to come here and enjoy the lifestyle that so many of us do each and every day?
That is very troubling to me. I don't understand that. I'm not a no-growth supporter. I think that runs contrary to making this a better state. I think it should be an incumbent on government when we can to work with business, not in a regulatory or restrictive way, but again in a catalytic way to create opportunities. And no growth is not the answer to anybody's economic challenges. It really isn't. Finding a way to provide jobs, to provide opportunity, to get regulations out of the way of business, whether it be in providing more affordable housing to the construction and the real estate business, or whether it be to help more skills-based training. That is the role that government should play. And I think that the no-growth initiatives are dangerous. They're anti-Western spirit, and they deeply trouble me for the future here. And I'm going to be a governor that is going to have sensible growth and recognize that we just can't have out of control growth and not have the infrastructure to support it. But I think we can do everything and do everything well. And I'm ready to lead as governor to bring that about.
So one of the things that everyone says is driving the anti-growth sentiment is the congestion on the roads, how long it takes to get from one place to another.
You don't say.
How do you attack that? I mean, and this will be a longer conversation here, but I mean, how do you, there's a lot of ideas out there. What do you support as far as getting the money to roll up those roads to grow them?
So, Ed, I live in Greenwood Village, and my commute down to the Capitol used to be reliably 18 minutes. Now it's reliably 47 minutes. And if there's rain, sleet, or snow, might as well stay at home. So I experience the traffic firsthand, as do most working men and women in Colorado. And this takes away from valuable family time, takes away from our time at work, being productive at work, and we have to find a way to fix it. And when I was treasurer in my first term term, I passed debt consolidation so that every single state agency had to go through the treasurer's office when it issued debt through the COP process. For the first time in Colorado history, we created the first refinancing requirement to make state agencies more transparent and more accountable when they issue debt. We changed the process for hiring bankers and lawyers, and the only two agencies that were exempt from compliance with our debt consolidation legislation were the Department of Higher Ed and the Department of Transportation. To me, that was problematic that they were exempt because the Department of Transportation does not have to go through legislative approval or through the Treasurer's office when it issues debt. And that's why when Shaylin Bott told me that the department had made the decision to issue bonds for $150 million worth of new office space, I told them, I won't use the colorful language, that was totally backwards and would set the statewide debate on infrastructure on the wrong foot, because the message he was sending is that he cared more about new offices for bureaucrats and new roads for all of us.
That is a great response. We'll be right back with more. Stay with us here on Connect and Collaborate. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and we're going to jump right in. We have Walker Stapleton with us, gubernatorial candidate. We've got Jeff Wasden, president of the Colorado Business Roundtable, here asking questions, along with Ed Seelever from Denver Business Journal. Take it away, gentlemen.
Now, when we left, Treasurer Stapleton, you were talking about your debt consolidation efforts as treasurer, but you hadn't gotten around yet to explaining exactly how you want to fund transportation improvements. Let's talk about that. Where's the money come from, and what do you want to put it into?
Well, I talked, Ed, in our last segment about the department not having to go through the treasurer's office or the legislature to issue debt, and I have asked for repeatedly line item information from the Department of Transportation so that I could better understand why in the early 2000s, when Bill Owens bonded for Trans Bonds 1, he was able to use money that the department now says they need for ongoing operations and maintenance. And I don't understand why that money that was used for bonding successfully for a 15-year period now has already been spoken for or committed to ongoing operations and maintenance. That level of detailed budget information was not shared with me as the treasurer of Colorado and a statewide elected official, which reminded me actually a lot of my lawsuit against Para, who didn't share information with me either as treasurer. Turns out you can't get a lot of information as the treasurer of the state, which is really troubling, because I actually think that all of our departments need to be audited. We need transparency and accountability, not just for statewide elected officials, but for ultimately the taxpayers of Colorado who are paying the bill. And so that's the first thing I would do. I would audit the Department of Transportation. I would change the leadership at the Department of Transportation, because I am troubled by the fact that Mike Lewis, nothing against him personally, but he was one of the leaders of the Big Dig, the largest state overrun boondoggle in transportation history, is our head of the Department of Transportation. Before him, Shaylin Bott was a political appointee and a buddy of Joe Biden's, who had no background as an engineer. And I want to appoint an engineer to that position who has as a core competency building roads and bridges. So we get back to that core competency in the department. Want to audit the department and want to make sure that we don't have a situation of no bid contracts, consultants who have worked for the Department of Transportation and their number one client becomes CDOT, and it's a lucrative contract, people traveling 3 times the distance they should to work on projects and charging per diem. There is all sorts of issues with the Department of Transportation that we need illuminated, and we need to make sure that the department has equal skin in the game as a partner before we actually go to the ballot and ask for any sort of revenue increase for transportation. We're not doing that right now. The department does not have that level of transparency and accountability, and so I believe going to the ballot is premature and is kind of putting the cart before the horse when it comes to asking taxpayers to foot the bill.
You know, we hosted the Moving Colorado Forward Transportation event where CDOT was here and presented. We certainly had the speaker, Crisanto Duran, the Senate President Kevin Grantham, but we also heard from 3 of the various proposals, one being led by the Coloradans for Colorado and from the Denver Chamber with Kelly Bruff and the coalition there, looking at doing some bonding of not only some of the existing revenue, but a sales tax increase and bonding on the sales tax. There's a proposal by related to using some existing revenue coupled with changes to the Pacific ownership tax, the SOTs, and then certainly Caldera talking about bonding. Do any of those resonate with you? Are you a fan of any of those?
Yeah, bonding resonates with me. I think we're gonna ultimately have to bond, but I think we have more money to bond with than we're showing. And the only way to know that, again, is to have an audit of the department, make things more transparent and accountable. Ed asked a question actually at the governor's debate a few weeks ago, where he said, the president's economic plan and the $1 billion windfall that may or may not come to Colorado. Hopefully it's more than $1 billion. How much of that money would you put into transportation? I would put every dime of that into transportation. I would find areas of waste within CDOT's budget that I absolutely know exist, and I would make sure that they're a greater player in bonding. And then I think we need to find a few dedicated revenue sources, maybe one, maybe more than one, out of the general fund to commit to transportation that aren't there right now. And I've been talking a lot about the abuse of medical marijuana in Colorado, the medical marijuana market in Colorado, whereby we've issued 150,000 medical marijuana cards to people, and there's no pre-existing condition or doctor's referral necessary. There's no distinguishing between the CBD and the THC part of the plant. The CBD part of the plant is the most medically viable part of the plant that's used for drops with people with epilepsy, for kids or adults. It's also the part of the plant that the NFL players are suing over to be able to use as massage cream. And if you take CBD, even though it's a Schedule I drug, which it shouldn't be, it should be reclassified by the federal government. You can drive. I could take CBD drops and drive right out of here after this interview. And I believe that people should have access to CBD and that it's medically valuable. But our medical marijuana laws don't distinguish between the CBD part of the plant and the THC part of the plant. The THC part of the plant is the part of the plant that causes you to order Domino's pizza 5 times in the night and watch reruns of TV episodes you've seen before. But from a revenue collection standpoint, Jeff and Ed, if you have a medical marijuana card, you can be 18 versus having to be 21 as a recreational buyer. And if you have a medical marijuana card, you pay 40% less, 40, for the exact same product, and you pay virtually no county or state tax. Plus, you can grow up to 98 plants. You can grow up actually only 12 plants, but then, I could make Ed my compassionate caregiver, and hopefully he lives close by. He could grow the other 86 plants. That's enough. I'm not a botanist, but that's enough pot to supply a small village of friends and neighbors with free pot. So I would argue that our pot market, our recreational pot market, is tourists and business professionals who don't want to be on a list so the state knows they smoke pot. But the best customers, the most habitual pot users, don't care if they're on a list. They just want the product for 40% cheaper. And if we fix this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. If we fix this, we can be making much more, 2-3 times, who knows how much more money than we're making right now from marijuana, and that money should be used as one of the revenue sources, an ongoing committed revenue sources in the general fund for roads.
I appreciate you sharing that, because that's one of the issues that we've been looking at the Colorado Business Roundtable, and changes to that, and wondering how we can weigh in and start to look at that as a policy change, whether it's a legislative fix or whether we need to go to the voters, because I think there's certainly some abuses there, and we're certainly missing out on several of the tax revenue.
Huge loophole. If you go to Walgreens and buy Advil, it's taxed. Some states tax prescription drugs. The feds tax prescription drug imports, and yet marijuana, medical marijuana, which doesn't distinguish between the THC and CBD, is virtually tax-free. It's a huge problem.
All right, another place where we see a lot of money coming into the state is through the energy sector right now.
Yep.
We've spent 8 years in which we've increased regulations, but at the same point, not as much as some people have wanted. What does an energy policy look like under a Stapleton governorship? Are you looking at maintaining what Hickenlooper has done, rolling back some of the regulations he's put in place? What are we looking at?
So this is a huge reason why I'm running for governor, because I firmly believe that Jared Polis is going to be the nominee for governor, and as far as I can tell, Jared Polis is running to end the future of the energy industry as we know it in Colorado. His plan for renewable energy economy by 2040, economists are saying, would cost us a minimum of $45 billion. It would take 230,000 jobs out of Colorado's economy and cost us $32 billion annually. That is an economic future we can ill afford. And I am for all forms of energy, whether it be wind energy, solar energy, natural gas, or oil and gas. What I am not for is subsidizing one form of energy over another so that hardworking Coloradans are seeing massive increases in their energy bills at times when they can least afford it for their families. And that's what we will see if we move to a 100% energy economy. Consumers, people struggling to get jobs for the first time, struggling to make ends meet, are going to see massive increases in their energy bills, and I cannot abide by that for Colorado families, and I won't support it. I think that it is important for the governor to articulate the values that the streams we care about fishing in the summertime, the mountains we care about skiing and hiking in the wintertime, and in the summertime. Those values are not mutually exclusive from having a responsible energy industry here in Colorado, and I believe we can have both. We can have the environment that all of us want to have. I love Colorado because of our great outdoors, whether it be rafting or fishing, and do all of the above in skiing. But I want to make sure that a vital economic contributor such as the energy industry is around for a long time in Colorado, because it's a direct correlation to how good our schools are, how good our cities are, because the money that they provide makes our schools better, makes our city services better. And so I will work with the industry to be a responsible contributor and a vital contributor to Colorado's economic future. And I think it's worth noting that every governor since Roy Romer has embraced a one Colorado regulatory framework for energy development in this state, and that has recently been abandoned by some cities deciding that they should universally ban fracking. And to me, that creates indecision from an investment standpoint in the state of Colorado, and some companies may just decide, well, they're just going to go elsewhere, and that would be unfortunate and a shame. And so I think we need to get back to that bipartisan idea of having a one Colorado uniform framework for energy regulation.
Is there anything else we need to do, or is it just keep status quo and get
No, I think I would pursue legal action as governor against cities that decide to abandon what should be a uniform state policy when it comes to regulations, because I don't think that's helpful to the state of Colorado and to having a policy which is clearly and evenly understood. And I think we need to have more people from the industry on the Oil and Gas Commission. We need to have more engineers on the Oil and Gas Commission, and we need to do a better job of explaining steps that the industry itself can take to be responsible, whether it be in terms of methane emissions, whether it be in terms of seismic monitoring of wells, whether it be in terms of recycling water through the fracking process, which is already 80% efficient, but can even reach higher standards. So I think that we can all work collaboratively together. There's going to be some on the far left that will not be able to be appeased no matter what happens. There'll be some on the other side that probably want more than is going to happen. But I think we can have a productive, responsible energy industry, and I can't wait to see that as governor.
Candidate Stapleton and certainly State Treasurer Stapleton have been very vocal in using your bully pulpit and advocating, leading the fights against some of these things that you think will damage and crippling to the state of Colorado and will harm our economy or families that are here. You talked about energy policy. There's things like 2,500-foot setbacks that will do the same thing as far as, a renewable mandate of going away to by 2040. Certainly a 2,500-foot setback does the same thing. You look at your fight with para reform, and I just want to kind of reshape the question, Walker, a little differently. How do you see your role as governor in leading and being active in some of these fights that may be different from previous or current governor?
So I think one of the reasons I'm running for governor is I think Colorado is in desperate need of leadership on important and unresolved economic problems that have only grown in size and scale and scope over the last few years in Colorado. What I think Colorado desperately needs is a governor who has had leadership experience in the private sector, has had leadership experience on important public policy issues, economic policy issues in Colorado, can combine the two and proactively get to work fixing some of our economic challenges. The only way that happens is if the governor is willing to intervene early in the legislative session. If you, both of you have been through numerous legislative sessions, our legislative calendar is totally mixed up, in my opinion, and that is the legislature comes in January. From January to April, they discuss everything from how to label pot edibles to physician-assisted suicide to other issues that are non-economic based issues. And by the time they get around to discussing economic policy, it's when the long bill drops. And unless you're on the JBC, you might, find out that you know less than you should know about what's actually in the budget. And most of our economic policy making in Colorado gets compressed into a 30-day period between April and May, and that's not the way it should be. We should be discussing economic policy legislation earlier in the session. There's a learning curve, and the governor has to be willing to expend political capital and take a position and establish working groups early in the legislative process, not just when a bill crosses his desk. If you compare the number of vetoes issued by Bill Owens to the number of vetoes issued by John Hickenlooper, you will find a massive disparity. And the governor has a bully pulpit that he or she should be able to wield from that office. And I will wield that bully pulpit, but if I have to, but I would rather work earlier with legislators from both parties to solve our economic challenges. And that includes transportation, healthcare. It certainly includes para and affordable housing. And again, I'm ready to do that job as governor, and I think I can do it, can be effective, and can lead Colorado forward.
And you've brought up several times, so let's not keep running away from it here. The issue of para reform. There is probably, I would estimate, a better likelihood than not that the legislature will do something this year about para. So rather than just say, what do you want to see done, let's ask first, what do you want to see done? What would you how would you shape this para reform package? And two, if they pass something, what do you do as governor at that point?
So in December, as the governor rolled out his budget, he came to a position that I've advocated for with him for years now, literally 7 years, and that is no more taxpayer money into para. And that's a position that I've had for 7 years. I think I sent him a text, jump on in, the water's nice, because I've tried to get him to agree with me, and he finally did, and I'm glad he did, because I feel like I've been right on that issue. Also, I've been saying for years, 5 years plus, and unless we fix this, one of the ratings agencies will come around and end up giving us a negative outlook, hopefully not as a precursor to a credit downgrade. And that happened as well. In December, Standard & Poor's, for the first time in Colorado history, gave a negative outlook on our credit because of our unfunded pension liability. There are so many ways to fix this problem, Ed, and yet it's so intractable from a public policy standpoint because people have a vested economic interest in maintaining the status quo. 11 of para's board members have a vested economic interest in maintaining the status quo. The majority of legislators have a vested economic interest in maintaining the status quo because they're DB members. Not to take anything away from them, but when you ask somebody to take a vote that may reduce what's in their wallet in terms of a retirement annuity, oftentimes it's too much to ask. And that is how the status quo has been maintained, that and some well-paid lobbyists on both sides of the aisle. But I'm for a multi-pronged approach. We need to raise the retirement age. This is not, by the way, this is not an approach which would take anything away from a 30-year teacher, because number one, you can't change the rules of the game on somebody that's been in the system. It's just fundamentally unfair, in my opinion. Number two, from an efficiency standpoint, it would make reform take until the cows come home, because it would be litigated until the cows come home. So you need to change it for newer, younger workers. We need to change retirement age. In Colorado, it's 58 for school teachers, 60 for everybody else. Jerry Brown, of all people, is on record in California saying because of the public pension crisis, public workers should work until the age of 70. I tell people that anytime you're a decade or more behind Jerry Brown in anything, it's a good rule of thumb. You have some catching up to do. We need to get real about retirement age, number one. Number two, we need to get real about the rate of return. The fixes that have been done to the plan have been incremental at best because they've assumed unrealistic rates of investment return. We need to get back to a realistic rate of investment return so we can fund the plan properly. And next, we have to ask members of the plan to contribute more to remain a part of a defined benefit plan that is in the past been too rich, both from the state standpoint and from the pension system standpoint. And if they're unwilling to pay more for the retirement benefits they're getting, then they should have the option of joining a defined contribution plan and walling off their defined benefits, what they've accrued in a defined benefit plan, and not being a continual liability to the state, and allowing them to invest then for their own retirement security, which gives them an option of what to do. And I proposed a plan. The board proposed a plan, the governor proposed a plan, and I proposed a plan, which the Denver Post said was a little, in parentheses, too extreme, after writing an editorial previously that said, which I liked better, by the way, that said, when it comes to Colorado's failed public pension system, it turns out that Treasurer Stapleton has been right all along. I memorized that quote, and I shared it with my wife immediately.
It's on your fridge, I know.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
And it wasn't. My plan is not too extreme. It actually is based on a friend of mine named Gina Raimondo, who's a Democratic governor of Rhode Island. She and I were treasurers in our first term together, and she was largely elected governor because of what she did reform-wise for pension reform in Rhode Island. And she had to do it because the city of Providence had gone bankrupt, and school districts in Rhode Island had gone bankrupt as a result of the pension liabilities. Maybe it was the city of Kingston and the Providence School District, but she froze the COLA. And what you find is, from a sensitivity analysis, the fastest way to restore funding to the pension system is the COLA, the cost of living adjustment. And for years in Colorado in the early 2000s, we were giving public workers a COLA adjustment above the rate of inflation, an extra 100 to 150 basis points, and it just doesn't work. And so I'm not proposing that we freeze the COLA forever, but we freeze it for a 3 or 5 year period to get back to a healthy funding level.
$18 billion as you came in as state treasurer, approaching $29 billion now with the budget for Colorado. Two-part question on the budget. What do you prioritize under a Governor Stapleton budget, and what changes to the process would you like to see to make the budgeting process run more efficiently and effectively in the state?
So I think, again, just in terms of a timetable, I think that talking to legislators early and being as proactive as possible from the governor's office early in the session is something we haven't seen, and something we need in Colorado. We need leadership on economic issues, and that's one of the reasons why I was attracted to run for treasurer in the first place, is because I wanted to deal with economic policy issues. And to me, these are the issues that are going to be most deterministic for the quality of life that we want for our kids and our grandkids and future generations. If we solve the affordable housing, if we solve transportation, if we solve our health care, we're going to all have a better quality of life. And I can't wait to get to work on those issues. And so I want to tackle those issues early in the session. I want to do it with a working group of both Democrats and Republicans. I have a history of working across the aisle on legislation. I've accomplished a lot in the treasurer's office with people, legislators being able to tell me to go fish at any time because I have no legislative authority. I think I can take what I've accomplished and accomplish so much more as the next governor of the state.
Are there areas of the budget that we need to be spending more on or less on?
I think that
where do you spend that $29 billion?
There's areas of the budget that we need more accountability that we're not getting. Automatic ratchets in our budget are eating us alive, and they're eating the budget of higher education alive, which is not protected by automatic ratchets. And my Amendment 23, which I'm not a fan of, which was started by a predecessor of mine in the treasurer's office who's running for governor, who I vanquished in my first election. That has created that has put us on autopilot in terms of our education spending, and we haven't gotten the accountability or the results for the money we're spending in K through 12 education. We just haven't. If you look at test scores and graduation rates, so I think we need to review automatic ratchets in our budget. I think we need more accountability for the money we're spending, and I think we need more transparency and accountability from state agencies to understand where waste is being created, and we need to fix Medicaid and we need to fix the pension system. If we do that, we'll go a long way to having a more sustainable budget for the long term in Colorado.
Let's talk about regulatory reform, too. This is an issue that we've heard a lot about. Are there areas...
Regulatory reform in 2 minutes. I love it.
Yes, or less. Are there areas that you think need reform, or is our regulatory system in a good place?
No, I definitely think that there's areas that we need reform. I mean, look, I used an example of having to go for an emissions test, and most cars now are equipped to pass an emissions test, and you got to drive out to an emissions center and kind of gun it on the. It smells terrible, and it's just a pain in the neck, and you have to pay a fee and stuff. And I think we can make that process more efficient, and we should make that process more efficient. And it should be in Kentucky. Governor Bevin has started a task force, a red tape task force, to hear from people at whether they be citizens of Kentucky or people within the agencies, what is a ridiculous regulation that it makes your job harder? I would be in favor of that. I think that makes a lot of sense from hearing from people firsthand what the problems are.
Walker, thanks for joining us today. Certainly this has been a long journey for you and something you've been prepared to do. In the last couple seconds, please let our listeners know how to find you, where they can get more information, and that last pitch.
Absolutely.
Sell it, Walker. Bring it home.
I got 36 seconds. Our website is stapletonforcolorado.com. Please visit us there. I'm committed to creating a better economic future in this state. I know I have the capability, the experience, and the leadership capability to do so, not just for my 3 kids, but for all of our kids that we care so much about in Colorado. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Walker.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been a great day here. Enjoy your weekend.